I'm Kate Winkler Dawson.
And I'm Paul Holes.
This is Buried Bones. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Kate, how are you?
I'm doing well. Happy Christmas break. We're going to go away for a little bit for some much needed rest. I think you need rest more than I do, probably.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. You've got your hands in a lot of different things.
I do. It's hard for me to take a vacation. We've talked about that for you too. But I was thinking of taking the fam to maybe Vermont to do some skiing. But I have, as an older adult, a fear of hurting myself skiing, even though I skied a lot when I was younger. And when I went to Boston University, we would go to like Burlington and ski there. So I just love Vermont in general. But have you done a lot of skiing? I don't know if we've talked about that.
I haven't done a lot of skiing. Kind of having spent most of my adult life sort of in the Bay Area, I've skied a handful of times up in Tahoe.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get down the side of a mountain. It's not pretty. I've gone on black diamond slopes and I've survived, but I've also left some gouges in the side of mountains, so I don't consider myself a good skier, but I can ski. And, of course I live in Colorado now, right? It's sort of, ski heaven. And I will tell you, I do notice a difference. We skied once, took the family up to Breckenridge. And that's when I was like, oh, I now understand what powder is.
Yeah.
It's so different than what I experienced during the handful of times I skied out there in the Tahoe area.
When I was at Boston University, they would take us on a bus up there in the winter I feel like it was every weekend. It was almost like a shuttle. And you could go to Burlington, Vermont and ski. And it was my first time really skiing. I had skied in Breckenridge when I was a kid, but I decided to go when I was in college. And I went all the way to the top. Maybe not all the way to the top, but I got pretty far. And I remember the person who was operating the tram or whatever we were on saying, okay, well, watch out for the weather. And I thought, what does that mean? And I kid you not, I hit every weather system available going down that mountain. It was like it started with snow and then it literally started hailing part of the way through. And then there was rain. And I just thought, I don't know how many times I can do this. Might be it for me. It was the weirdest thing. And it was ice. It felt like ice.
Yeah. And that's, at least that's been my experience in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I skied in Breckenridge, when we first started, it was like whiteout blizzard conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going, how are we going to make a day out of this? And then it ended up clearing up and becoming very nice. With the weather up in the mountains, of course, can change on a dime.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love the mountains. I was thinking about my favorite, landscape. And I think it is mountains and it is agricultural land, just like vast amount of land, almost like the marshes that I showed you in one of our episodes, just like green for acres and acres and acres. But I have friends who live by oceans and that's all there is for them. So there you go.
Yeah, I love the mountains. I love rugged ocean coastline, like Northern California,
Mm-hmm.
Like the Mendocino, going up north from there. I'm not a big ocean beach person. I don't like to just lounge on a beach. If I'm going to be by the ocean, I'd rather at least be in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will tell you, your love of agricultural land, I've seen like in Iowa, I was shocked at this beautiful rolling
Mm-hmm.
crops and old barns. I mean, just amazing, beautiful. But then I had to drive home from Madison, Wisconsin to Colorado Springs, and there was a stretch from Nebraska to Colorado through nothing but cornfields that were flat as far as you could see.
Mm-hmm. You didn't like that?
Not my thing at all. The most boring drive I've ever done.
Oh, sorry, Nebraska. I find beauty in cornfields, just for the record, Nebraska. But, well, I understand that. I mean, my dad was from Missouri. I've said that before. And I love Missouri, but it felt very flat to me too. But I have a good friend who adores the desert, and I don't know how I feel about the desert. You know, I have been intending to go to West Texas forever, which is supposed to be just unbelievably beautiful. So I'm going to try to keep an open mind. But I was doing a shoot for one of my documentaries in Pahrump, Nevada. It's tiny. I know you have that quizzical look that I had.
Never heard of it, but if it's somewhere in Nevada, I can only imagine what it looks like.
Pahrump, Nevada, and it was gorgeous. I mean, just hills, dunes, mountains of really white sand. But again, going back to every kind of fear I have driving through it by yourself when you don't. I was alone when you don't see people for hours, you know, on these roads because we were really deep into the Mojave Desert. It was a little scary because I thought, what happens if I break down? What happens, you know, in every scenario? But that's the scaredy cat in me. So,
well, you mummify. That's what happens.
Oh, okay, Paul.
Yeah, I'm not a big desert person, but you know, like it's a Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, with those amazing cacti that you see in the Roadrunner Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons. I mean, I thought that was really cool.
I had never pictured us talking about Looney Tune cartoons, but that sounds great. Yeah.
Well, I grew up on them.
Oh, yeah, me too. Well, let's shift over to California, where I know at least one bit of your heart is, because I know that you were an Army brat and moved around everywhere, but I think you glow the most when we talk about California. So
I was an Air Force brat, but you were close.
Air Force brat. Pardon me. Okay, let's just jump right into this. Okay, let's set the scene. We are in Covina, California, which is 22 miles east of downtown LA in the San Gabriel Valley. Are you familiar with that or no?
I know of it. I can't say I've ever been there.
Okay, so you've never worked a case kind of in this area ever or anything? No. Consulted. Okay. So we're starting with a 911 call. And it is 1956 is our year. It's July. And around 10 p.m., there's a sergeant with the LA County Sheriff's Office named Harry Andre. And he's responding to this call from a guy named William, and his middle name, Dale Archard. And he'll go by Dale. So he and his wife, who is named Zella Austin Archard, have been assaulted and robbed in their home. So it sounds like a home invasion. This is, I have in my note here, Paul, it literally says, "Let me get through this story." And that's a note to you.
Got it. You got it.
Put up your hand if it drives you crazy. Okay. So this is what Dale says when the sergeant shows up. He says that the offenders are two Mexican men. One is armed with a knife. The other one has a gun. They broke into the house about 30 minutes earlier, and he immediately called 911 when they left. They detained him in the living room and injected him with a hypodermic syringe. And then he says one of the men covered his face with his own bathrobe, and then they went into Zella's bedroom. For the record, she's 48, he's 44. Dale seems to be seemingly a normal 44-year-old man, perfectly capable of defending himself if needed. So Zella, just also for full transparency, at the end of this, she is not sexually assaulted. She is not murdered. She can tell this story. She says that these guys, that there was one man who went into the bedroom. He was disguised. He tried to incapacitate her. She fights back, and the man in disguise leaves the bedroom. Dale is yelling at the guy, to stop, and he is yelling to Zella, just let him have whatever he needs to have, and then he'll leave. He's essentially begging her to just not fight this guy again. So the guy comes back into the bedroom. She allows him to put a pillowcase over her head and to bind her arms, and he injects her with a hypodermic syringe. They made off with about $100 from Dale's wallet. They found about another $500 in the house. They took that. They took a revolver. this is all worth about $7,000 today. And like I said, Zella said that she was not seriously assaulted. And this seems bananas. The hypodermic needle or the hypodermic syringe is what alerts me the most, I think, to this whole thing being just really off the wall. Do you want to comment now, or do you want to hear a little bit more about what's happening in this case?
Yeah, I want to hear more.
Okay. Sergeant Andre takes a look around after he hears the story. He tells Zella to sit down because she's really dizzy and totally freaked out. He looks at her wrists, and there are rope burns on her wrists. There are 2 puncture wounds in her buttocks. But nothing has really been ransacked. There's some cash that was taken, as I mentioned before. There's no signs of forced entry that we know of, which, of course, we've talked about. If you have a gun, there's not going to be any signs of forced entry. Jewelry is in plain sight. Nobody takes it. They find a syringe in a nearby vacant lot. They also find a vial of long-acting NPH U-80 insulin, and half the bottle has been used. There's also a 20-gauge hypodermic needle that is found in their bathroom, like not one of theirs. It's laying like it had been tossed. Then Sergeant Andre calls a doctor. The doctor comes and looks them over because Zella is feeling very dizzy. The doctor prescribes Seconal, and it's a very potent barbiturate to calm her nerves. Then he leaves. And I can tell you what happens after that, but is there something to say now, or do you want to keep learning more info?
Maybe just a brief comment. Right now up front, this sounds like a standard home invasion 211, home invasion robbery. The use of the hypodermic syringes is interesting. And if they're injecting insulin, the only thing I can think of is they're just trying to, plunge blood glucose levels down in the victim so that they're not, kind of like she's feeling dizzy. Mm-hmm. So in essence, she's going into this hypoglycemic state to where maybe I don't know if it would render her unconscious depending on how much insulin is there, but most certainly energy levels would go down. That's odd. I'm not sure what the offenders are thinking, if in fact that's all they're injecting. It's kind of a very interesting twist to a typical home invasion.
Yeah, and they don't find evidence that Dale was injected, which doesn't make sense to me either. If you're so to me, at first I thought this was a sophisticated chloroform almost kind of thing, like, incapacitate her, she knocks out. Why not do that to Dale also? And I'll tell you, let me point this little bit out. Zella throughout the night is sweating profusely. Her breathing becomes labored. She starts salivating, and 8:00 the next morning, she starts convulsing and she dies within a day or two.
Okay. Well, now it's going to get to where, what does toxicology show? What's the autopsy results show? Mm-hmm. So the offenders are very superficial in terms of the financial gain. They're just taking cash. They're not taking other valuables that they would have to put effort out, like the jewelry, in order to be able to sell it. Maybe this is more targeted against Dale and Zella than an actual financially motivated crime.
Well, let's go, because you had requested the coroner's report. Here it is. The report says there are 4 puncture wounds in Zella's buttocks. 2 more injection sites than what was noted at the crime scene, which I was surprised. But remember, Dale called out to her, just let them do whatever they're going to do. And so she complied. And she said, I complied, So there are no poisonous substances in Zella's body. They think that this was an overdose of insulin, which would have caused death. But there are no tests at the time that can reliably indicate excessive insulin in the blood or tissues of deceased people. Chief of toxicology also sees no reason why Zella would have been taking any kind of insulin. There were no insulin cell tumors in her pancreas. There were no signs of a pathological disease that would have been treated by insulin. At the end of the day, the cause of her death is reported to be bronchopneumonia due to coma of undetermined origin.
I guess I have to assume that, a high dose of insulin could potentially do that. She had 4 puncture wounds, and there was multiple syringes possibly found at the scene.
They found one 20-gauge hypodermic needle. And remember, they found a vial of long-acting, I don't know what U80 means, insulin, and half the bottle had been used.
Okay. Yeah, so right now, this is where I would be wanting to talk to a toxicologist about exactly what's going on. Because she just doesn't have insulin in her system. She also has the barb in her system, which is a sedative, so if her glucose levels are just being absolutely plummeted down to 0 because she has such high insulin, and then you throw a sedative on top of that, could that induce a coma? I would think that's a possibility.
And remember, they found the insulin bottle in a parking lot, a vacant lot nearby. I don't think they're finding that at 11 p.m. at night, the night this happened, which is when Sergeant Andre reported to the scene. I have to imagine they would have found it the next morning. So the doctor's giving her a barbiturate, not knowing, it sounds like, what she's been injected with. Nobody knows what she's been injected with because nobody's found the bottle yet. So that seems haphazard to me, not knowing, when you've got a woman saying they poked me with a needle, not knowing what she was, shot up with.
No, well, for sure. She could have been, shot up with a different barb, or she could have been shot up with another sedative, and now the doc is giving her another barb on top of it, and it just is now crashing her system, into a very depressed state.
Mm-hmm. So what Sergeant Andre comes up with, the things that he's trying to piece together are interesting. He had asked Zella to describe the masked man, because remember, there was another one in the other room with Dale. She kept saying things like, my husband's build, my husband's height, but she did not say this was my husband. And Sergeant Andre really starts to suspect Dale of something. Because, if you remember the story, Zella is alive and is able to recount all this stuff, but she does not see 2 men. She only sees one man who's in disguise. Then that man leaves. Dale screams out, just let him do what he needs to do, Zella. And then the masked man comes back inside. So she can't confirm. Nobody can confirm except Dale. There's 2 men, and and Sergeant Andre is kind of calling BS on this. And I don't think it's anything about Dale specifically. I just think he doesn't think the pieces are coming together very well.
Yeah, he may be onto something. Did Dale set up some sort of ruse, to eliminate his wife and try to get away with it? This is a very interesting twist, I would say.
Yeah. So, let me tell you a little bit about Dale, since Sergeant Andre is keeping a close eye on him. He was born on an Arkansas ranch in 1912. He's been married numerous times. He got married at 17. Then he left that woman after a few years and moved to California. He bopped around a little bit. He ended up working at several hospitals. He was an orderly. He was also an attendant at a different one, but hospitals. He married at 23. He left her too. And then there was a big gap. He got married again when he was 37, this time to a nurse. This is when the legal stuff starts to happen, and it will lead up to Zella, which will then lead to quite another host of interesting things happening. So he and his nurse wife were charged with illegal possession of morphine. and they were sentenced to 5 years probation. But a second drug offense landed Dale in a minimum security prison in Chino, from which he promptly escaped. Then he moved over to San Quentin in 1951. He finished off his term at San Quentin, and that finished off his third marriage to the nurse. Then he gets out in 1953, and he goes back to Southern California. He starts running scams. So Dale is not a good guy, is what Andre is figuring out. There are a lot of scams, women he dated for their money. And then in 1956, he meets Zella. Within 6 months, they get married. And now she is dead. And we find out that they had been married 2 months, that she had sold her house for $10,000, which is now $118,000 today. And escrow closed on July 13th, 11 days before this home invasion. He had written 2 checks on the shared account and basically took all her money. And he bought a Thunderbird. He collected $7,000 today, $600 then, from her life insurance policy. This is not a wealthy woman, but it sounds like wealthier than he is. And, you know, all of this is to say, it doesn't mean that he killed her, but Dale has a history of loving and leaving women. This appears to be the first one that he left who has ended up dead shortly thereafter.
Well, Dale has that medical background,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so now you have this oddity of these Hispanic males injecting Zella, apparently with insulin, you know, so there is overlap with Dale's skill set, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this whole set of circumstances around, you know, Zella selling the house, getting blocks of money, you know, there's, you know, Dale being involved in scams, you know, things are really starting to stack up that maybe this was a ruse. I just wonder, the injection of insulin, how confident could an offender be that the insulin would actually kill Zella? So, you know, that's, I think, something that, you know, was there an intent to kill, or was this an intent to disable? It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
So in this case, Zella is pacifying herself because her husband is saying, stay still and let him do whatever he needs to do. So she is, not willingly, but she is receiving 4 shots, according to the coroner.
Well, you know what, I guess one of the things, you know, because there's this, you know, one theory that Dale is actually the offender. He's the one that's injecting Zella. But if Zella, while she's still cognizant, has a male in the room with her, and she's hearing Dale's voice outside of the room saying, let him do whatever. So now do we have an accessory to Dale, helping Dale out?
What I believed happened, and the way Dale described Zella, is she fought this guy. He backed off and left the room. And then Dale is saying, honey, just let him do what he's going to do, like yelling back toward her when she's by herself. She's not running out of the room. So she never sees anybody but this one masked man. And I think Dale's probably around the corner. So that's the issue. She does confirm there's somebody who's masked there, but when she hears Dale, the guy is out of the room. And of course, I think Andre thinks it's suspicious when she's sort of like, yeah, he was my husband's height. Yeah. I mean, she is not expressing suspicion.
Sure. Yeah, so okay. So I thought possibly the scenario suggested that there was somebody else present, but the way that you just explained it, Dale could have done this whole thing himself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Dale has a quick rebound because he, just a few months after Zella's death, he moves in with a 46-year-old woman named Juanita Plum. They met in Tijuana. Doesn't sound like a grieving husband, but whatever. She is a very well-off divorcee. She owns a $40,000 house in Monrovia, which is in LA County. And She has a lot of expensive furniture, a car, $14,000 in notes and bonds, lots of money, essentially. So her estate these days would be worth $765,000. So this is for him, a much bigger jump to go from Zella to Juanita. Okay, so in 5 months of being with this woman, Juanita, he cashes out all of her assets. And they file insurance claims for 2 incidents of arson in 1957. They collect between $11,000 and $12,000, which is $150,000 ish today. But the money runs out in late August of 1957, and they separate. Then they reconcile, and then they marry. And bad things are going to start happening. But running through that much money, an estate that is, almost $800,000 today, in what looks to me to be about a year, even less than a year, it seems incredible.
Yeah, well, and this is where investigating this, even though you have what appears to be, robbery / homicide going on, this is a white collar type crime. And anytime you have something like this, it's follow the money. So if Dale is, in essence, embezzling money from ultimately this next wife of his, where is that money going? How is he spending it? Is he gambling it? Is he hiding it? Is he tucking it away? Does he have a different life in which now he's got a fancy house and cars and maybe another wife on the side? There's all sorts of possibilities going on here.
Let me tell you what happens to Juanita. They go on a honeymoon. They go to Vegas. She falls ill in their hotel room. Here's the description. She's incoherent. She's slipping in and out of consciousness. She is sweating, which sounds very similar to what happened with Zella. Her face is bloated. At the Southern Nevada Memorial Hospital, Dale tells doctors that Juanita has been taking barbiturates and drinking bourbon to go to sleep. At first, they discharge her. They tell Dale that she should just drink some black coffee and stay on her feet. I mean, that seems like terrible advice. But by that afternoon, her condition has significantly declined. He takes her back to the hospital. When she gets back to the hospital, she is comatose. She's hardly breathing. And she is cyanotic, which is a lack of oxygen, right?
Well, and kind of like if she has this pinkish hue, almost as if she's been exposed to carbon monoxide.
Okay. Her pupils are dilated. Her body temperature is subnormal, and her pulse is extremely low. They prescribe glucose. Does that make sense?
Well, are they suspecting that she's hypoglycemic?
Well, I don't know, because what he had said is barbiturates.
Barbs and bourbon.
Right. Is that a tonic for barbs and bourbon?
You take a bunch of sugar. I don't know.
I don't know.
That's interesting. I think what they're seeing is that she is, somehow in a sedated state, and they're trying to infuse her with the glucose to provide her sort of like a kind of an energy source for her body to recover from. Mm-hmm. But they must be suspecting that, and maybe they did some blood tests and they're going, oh, geez, she's hypoglycemic. We need to get her glucose or blood glucose up.
Well, I think this bit will be helpful. She starts convulsing and then she dies. And which is, I think, what we knew would happen. The doctor says that he believes she died of cardiac failure resulting from an overdose of barbiturates. So they believe Dale.
Okay.
And
all right.
And Sergeant Andre from LA County, this is not his jurisdiction. This is Nevada. This isn't California. But he finds out about Juanita's death, and he informs the Clark County Sheriff's Department in Nevada that Dale's previous wife had also died just, a year earlier, but it's too late for an extensive autopsy because they believed Dale, and Dale said cremate her.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but at least, the LA detective is on it. He obviously has tremendous suspicions about Dale. And so he's like a dog on a bone, and he's going to take advantage if he sees that, Dale's involved in another case. Well, now potentially we can get him for something.
Yeah. And this story, I usually say this is what the story is about. This is the insulin part of the story is really interesting. We have talked about people who target, their spouses for money, but kind of the way of thinking, saying that this is an accident or trying to set it up like it's an accident. It seems to actually work in Dale's case, if this is where we're heading, because so far you have doctors who have returned the sick patient to him, presumably for him to make her more sick. I mean, there's no bones about it. Obviously, Dale is not a good person here.
Yeah. Well, and these doctors, they don't know Dale's history. They don't know what's going on. They're not even necessarily suspecting that there's a crime that happened. They're just now dealing with a sick person. And they have the husband saying, altering, at least offering up a plausible reason why she is exhibiting the symptoms that she is, and whether she died of barbs and bourbon or she died of insulin right now, I think is still a toss-up in this case.
Well, when Nita dies and her estate is divided among her living relatives, she was getting life insurance from her husband's, her previous husband's death. So she was getting some money in. So it gets divvied up, and she leaves Dale $1. Well done, Juanita.
Oh, so there was some marital strife before she died.
I'm sure she knew he blew everything the first time, but then they ended up getting married. She left him, and then she went back to him, and they got married. But this is what happened. I mean, you don't trust your spouse. Obviously, she left him $1, which I'm sure just pissed him off beyond belief.
Sure.
Okay, moving on to another person. A year passes. He doesn't spend very much time. It just seems like he's going so fast. And I don't know if that's money or what that is, but it seems like he's not using a lot of common sense about suspicion, but he's gotten away with 2 so far.
Sure. And of course, I think money is a big deal. When you think if he had the equivalent of today, $800,000 that he just completely blew in a year, he's needing to have income coming in order to do whatever he's doing with that money.
Yeah. And we don't know what he's doing with it yet. We don't know.
Right. So
he gets smart, and he starts to use an alias, probably because that pesky Sergeant Andre is floating around. In May of 1959, so we started in 1957, so this is just 2 years. He uses an alias, Jim Arden. So this is a little confusing, but when Juanita and Dale separate, there's no need for like a legal separation because they were never married. They are separated for about a year. In that year, he marries somebody else, a woman named Gladys Stewart. They end up divorcing when Juanita, the rich woman, decides that she'll take him back. So he divorces Gladys within that year and goes back to Juanita. So after Juanita dies, a year later, Dale decides he wants to remarry the woman whom he married when he was separated for about a year from Juanita. So remember, that woman's name was Gladys Stewart. And I don't know why Gladys agrees to this, who knows? But Gladys is the ex-wife of one of Dale's friends, who is a guy named Frank Stewart. This does not seem to be a problem at all for Frank or for Dale. And in fact, they are kind of going into business together, and they are planning a combined business and pleasure trip to Vegas for the next year. And, Gladys will come along. So she was married to Frank, divorced him, then married Dale. Then they got divorced, and then she remarries Dale after Juanita dies. I don't.
It's hard to stay on top of that.
It sounds exhausting for everybody involved.
Yes.
So Dale and Frank decide that they're going to go to the airport, which is now the Harry Reid International Airport. Before it was called McCarran International Airport. And this is in 1960. So before they get on the plane, they stop in the bathroom. Frank slips on some debris, which it sounds like was a banana peel. And my reaction was seriously a banana peel. But he slips and he strikes his head on the countertop in the bathroom. So I know that this is convoluted. Dale is scared that Frank might be concussed. He takes him to the Southern Nevada Memorial Hospital emergency room. That is where Juanita had been. By 10:30 that night, Frank is dead. And these are all the same symptoms. He does have a contusion on his head, but all the same symptoms. And the doctors say it is a cerebral hemorrhage, possibly related to a history of cardiovascular disease. No charges.
So is it possible when Frank is in this bathroom at the airport that Dale from behind strikes him with some sort of weapon, right? Or he grabs him and hits his head against the counter or something, So I don't know. Yeah, Dale's all about Dale. And he's going to eliminate and financially drain the assets of anybody in his life.
I agree, and I think that is a good way of thinking about it. So he hits Frank on the head because Frank is not going to be someone who's going to voluntarily, take a syringe to the butt. And then he goes to the hospital, and in the meantime, because he's concussed, he, gets these syringes. He gets a syringe and full of insulin, and then same thing, and then dies. I mean, is the hospital must see this every once in a while or some? I mean, these are, I guess, are these normal symptoms? The one I've been describing, having a hard time breathing, dilated pupils. It's just the same thing with all of these people, it sounds like.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because I could see where there's a variety of different medical conditions that all have the same symptoms that, these medical professionals see, day in and day out. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking Dale hits, Frank in the back of the head, in this airport restroom. And while he's tending to Frank, he's injecting him in that.
Okay.
Yeah, that bathroom, because he could do that right through the clothes.
Yeah, and he's in a trauma, so he's not feeling anything, most likely.
Yeah. Frank is like, oh my God, whether he's even still conscious, but at the same time, Dale's just got this formula that has worked on the women, and now he's taking out a guy.
Gosh, I mean, this is just it's kind of crazy. So for me, it is clear. Is this a serial killer? Because we've talked about this definition before. It's not for sexual gratification, but it is multiple people.
Yeah. Well, when you take a look at the definitions of a serial killer, and they have a tendency to be, I feel, kind of too vague, but fundamentally it's having killed 3 or more with a cooling off period in between. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't, the definition doesn't discuss the psychology of the offender. Mm-hmm. It's just, have you killed 3 or more, and there's time in between each homicide? Then yes, you have somebody that is by definition a serial killer. Mm-hmm. And this is a type of predator. Now, this is a predator that is financially motivated. So this is very different than, your Ted Bundys or your Jeffrey Dahmers, you're sexually motivated, you're fantasy motivated predators. But it is a type of serial killer. This is very different than your mass killer or your spree killer, which people often convolute with serial killer. Your mass or spree killers are in essence in one event, which can be extended over a period of time, but they're going out and killing multiple people, such as going into a schoolyard or going into a fast food restaurant and killing multiple people. Completely different psychology than a serial killer, because that serial killer over an expanse of time is now committing these crimes for their own personal gain. For Dale, it's financial. For D'Angelo, Golden State Killer, there's a sexual component.
Well, this story keeps getting wilder and wilder as far as I'm concerned. Dale, in the wake of Frank's death, is, I'm presuming, excited because he's attached to 2 different life insurance policies. Now, my notes say that Frank took them out on himself. I don't know about that, because one of these policies is for Gladys as the beneficiary, who is, of course, Frank's ex-wife, Dale's current wife, but also Dale's mother, Jenny Mae Archard. And I have no idea why that would have happened. I think it must have been Dale, must have been the one that took those out, right? The policies in today's money would have been about $900,000 total.
Pretty good money.
So he says, yippee, he files claims for the insurance money, but they are dismissed. And I think that Gladys finally says, we're getting a divorce, and she took the money.
Okay.
And so he is, which is great, Gladys. I don't know what happens with his mother, but his mother gets involved here pretty soon. So now we've got insurance fraud, it sounds like.
Frank's mother gets involved.
No, Dale's mother. Now,
Dale's mom.
So
okay.
I don't know why he would have, how he would have justified Frank, putting insurance, life insurance, as Jenny as a beneficiary, but that's what ended up happening. I'm assuming she got the money. His mother got the money. And now we go to his family, because his family starts getting affected. Okay. So in 1961, there is an officer in charge of all traffic-related deaths in LA County. He's called to investigate the death of a young man named Bernie Kirk Archard. He's 15, and he is Dale's nephew from his brother. And Dale is also one of Bernie's guardians, because the brother has died. Dale is a guardian. According to the police, the reason why this sergeant is showing up is because Bernie had been injured in a hit-and-run accident a month earlier. He died 13 days later at the Long Beach Memorial Hospital. There is no evidence that he was ever involved in a hit-and-run accident. So I think that this was reported by somebody, and we presume Dale, and when they came out to investigate, there's any report. So let me just tell you about the circumstances real quick. Bernie's mother, the teenager's mother, had deserted the family when he was a child. His father, who is Dale's brother, was Everett Archard. I told you that he had died. He was an engineer at an oil refinery. He had died of a heart attack in 1960, which was almost 2 years earlier than when the son died. Before his death, Everett had warned women to not marry his brother. He said he's a lying bastard. And when Everett died of that heart attack, Dale was right by his side.
No.
And now Everett's son is dead from a car accident that never actually happened.
And is there a life insurance on Bernie, and Dale, the beneficiary?
since Everett died, Bernie had been living with Jenny Archard, who is Dale's mother, who had received money, remember, from Frank Stewart's life insurance policy that we're presuming Dale took out on him, thinking he would get that money from his mother, and it didn't happen. Yeah. So Bernie had been living with his grandmother in Long Beach, and Dale was stealing Everett's life insurance policy that was left to their mother from the mother. So Everett had life insurance. He left it to his mother. Dale's been stealing that money.
Okay.
And then it gets worse because Bernie is hit, quote unquote, by a car. He goes into a coma. Before he dies, Dale's mom, Jenny, has a massive cerebral hemorrhage, and she dies. And she's immediately cremated. And then her nephew or her grandson dies 4 days later. His official cause of death is terminal bronchopneumonia. He is also quickly cremated. So, I'm sure that this is driving the investigators crazy, all of whom, although these are different. Well, we're back in LA County, so we're back with Sergeant Andre. So we've really only hit Nevada and LA County, I believe, so far.
Sure. But by the time Sergeant Andre becomes aware of anything, these bodies are cremated, Dale's receiving life insurance policies, because unless somebody is suspecting a crime up front and reporting that back to the authorities, Sergeant Andre he's completely unaware of this. He's got a whole caseload elsewhere, right?
Yep.
And so Dale is now picking off his own family members and financially benefiting from it, and law enforcement has no idea what's going on.
Well, nothing is, I think you're right, because no one is making a move on Dale, and he continues on. Now, there is a 4-year period that I thought was interesting. I don't know what he was doing in this 4-year period, but he resumes using the name Jim Arden. And he meets a woman who is named Mary Brinker Post. She's 60. And he is, let's see. Well, I mean, he's not far off, I guess. He is 53 at this point. She is a famous author. She's a best-selling author. She wrote a book called Annie Jordan in 1948. I read a bit of it. It's pretty good. But it was a best-selling book. They marry after 2 months. He burns through her money, which is about $200,000 today. And he racks up about $14,000 in debt then, which is about $144,000 today. She, about a year and a half after meeting him, files for bankruptcy. And he leaves her because, of course, bankruptcy, no money. He goes back to Gladys, who he had killed her ex-husband. I'm sure she doesn't suspect that, but I mean, Gladys, they had divorced already, so this is twice divorced.
Yeah. Dale, he's a con man.
Yeah.
He's got the gift of gab. It seems like he has the ability to socially interact with people to keep them where they don't suspect him of these crimes that he's committing.
I mean, it's unreal. So now we're going to be back to Mary. After he leaves Mary, and I have to presume starts divorce proceedings, he's with Gladys. 2 weeks after that, Mary is in a minor car accident for real. She's in Montclair. She gets into a fender bender. Her face is bruised and her nose is injured. And she gets a 2-inch bandage. She is shaken up and she calls Dale and he visits her on October 31st. And then she ends up in the hospital. Blood tests indicate a low blood glucose level and the presence of barbiturates. They do an EKG or they do an EEG because this has been a car accident. And it shows severe depression of cortical activity with no localizing features. She dies the next day. Dale says a car accident. She had head injuries. But this time, the investigators who are in LA County get an autopsy. They act quickly. And her cause of death is listed as bronchopneumonia secondary to hypoglycemia, but he is arrested. And I don't know if that they see the pattern and they feel like, I don't know why he's arrested. I don't know how that changes anything,
Yeah, I'm not sure because, at this point, it's got to come from these autopsy results and a pathologist rendering an opinion that somebody had injected her or forced her to ingest the barbs and the insulin. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're looking at Dale.
So he is arrested in 1967 in his LA home. He's charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Zella, the first wife, his nephew Bernie, and Mary, the author. He pleads not guilty to all counts. So he is called, I had not heard of this before, he is called a serial matrimonialist killer. Have you heard that phrase?
No.
I love that phrase, a serial matrimonialist killer. I mean, I guess we would say like the low term would be a Bluebeard killer, but I don't know. This is what they're calling him.
Well, I would like, he's the male version of what is typically called the Black Widow.
Yeah.
Right? Where females are scamming and killing men for financial gain. He's doing the same thing. And of course, there's many examples of men doing this to women.
Mm-hmm. Well, he waives his right to a jury trial. He goes with a judge and testimony starts in December of 1967. So first, I think they're establishing the fact that Dale could have pulled off the insulin. Now, of course, they say he has been shooting people with insulin to put them in a coma and then they die. There is a head psychiatrist at a state hospital where Dale worked in the early 1940s, and he details this procedure that they had used at an insulin shock ward. So I did not know anything about this. At this time in the 40s, insulin shock therapy was a common psychiatric treatment for schizophrenia. So you would inject a patient with large doses of insulin to induce daily comas for a period of months. And so he was well trained to give insulin injections. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, well, I don't know anything about that for the schizophrenia, but most certainly what it tells me is Dale is extremely comfortable with not only the injection of insulin, but what its response is going to be. He has a skill set, he has an expertise, and that is what he is relying upon in order to commit his crimes. And I suspect that in some of the cases, he's not just injecting insulin, but he's also combining it with the barbs. Barbs seem to be a consistent thing throughout this entire series. And so he probably recognizes that the combination of high insulin levels plus this potent sedative, the barbs, which many people have overdosed on and died, it gives him the confidence that his victim is going to ultimately die from it.
Well, remember I told you he was married to a nurse in the 40s. So this was before Zella's death. She testifies. Her name is Dorothea, and they got into trouble together for, illegally possessing morphine. She testifies that after she met Dale, he roped her into a fraudulent scheme. This scheme designed to obstruct criminal proceedings against their mutual friend. Listen to this. In 1947, their friend, who was a guy named William Edward Jones, was facing child molestation charges for raping a 13-year-old girl. Dale goes to William and says, let's feign a motoring accident and a head injury to delay this litigation. And he tells William that we can make this more convincing if you let me inject you with insulin. Then he would bribe the girl's family to drop the case. And he tells William it would cost about $10,000. William says, this sounds great. I mean, $10,000 in 47 would have been a massive amount of money. So Dorothea gets the insulin from a hospital and gives it to him in 47. She remembers telling him that insulin would be the perfect murder weapon. I don't know why Dorothea would have told him that, but she did. The men staged a car crash. William posed by a nearby tree, and Dale injected him with insulin. Then Dale calls the police anonymously to report the wreck. When the police get to the scene, they find William discombobulated and hungry. They take him to a nearby hospital where doctors say that he had they note that he had a headache and subnormal temperature. Shortly after his arrival, he begins sweating. I mean, the whole thing, the muscles are twitching, his breathing, his pulse, everything is bad. They perform a spinal puncture around 11 a.m. They find that his blood pressure and his sugar levels were dangerously low. He was given 50% glucose. He falls into a coma the next day and he dies. Doctors listed the cause of death as undetermined. In the meantime, Dale goes to the family of the girl who William had raped. He offers them $300. He offers them a $300 used car on the condition that they leave town immediately. Now, what's probably missing from that story is, remember the $10,000. William hands him $10,000 to, create all of this so that the girl's testimony goes away. So William dies, Dale gets the money, and then he gives up $300 to the girl's family, who I'm presuming must have been, impoverished. And so that solves that. I mean, that's a lot. And so Dorothea lays that all out for the judge.
Well, this, Dorothea's testimony just underscores how far back in time Dale has been committing these crimes. Mm-hmm. And it's stunning when you think about his success over and over again and the amount of money, because at times he's receiving large sums of money from his victim or his victim's estate. And it kind of comes back to, well, where is that money going? How is Dale spending that money? Mm-hmm.
So Dale takes the stand. I don't think he does a great job. He blames Dorothea, no surprise, and says, I divorced her. She's just trying to get back at me. He also says, which to me makes sense, many of these people were alcoholics, and the ones who weren't were in all of these car accidents. You can't prove that I injected anybody with anything. But you have some experts, doctors who take the stand, and they say all of these people who at least he's being tried for, these people all exhibited symptoms consistent with hypoglycemia. And Bernie, the nephew, and Mary, the ex-wife, have slides that contain their slices of their brains. And those slides showed uniform damage, inconsistent with trauma, but consistent with massive doses of long-acting insulin. So that's part of the trial. And I think no surprise, in 68, the judge finds Dale guilty on all 3 counts of murder. He is sentenced to death in the San Quentin State Prison gas chamber. In the early 70s, the Supreme Court isn't sure, vacillates back and forth on the legality of the death penalty. It delayed his execution. But in 77, before his sentence is carried out, Dale dies of pneumonia in Vacaville State Prison at age 65. Another one gets away with it. I mean,
Wow.
He's convicted in 68. And so he dies 9 years later.
In the 70s, you said.
Yeah.
Right?
9 years later for the deaths of, I can't even keep up with how many people he killed. A lot of people.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny. You mentioned Vacaville. That was my rear neighbor for much of my life, mm-hmm. or a neighbor, if you will. Both California Medical Facility as well as, the Solano State Penitentiary was right there in Vacaville. And at one point in the early 90s, literally I could look out my back window and I would see those two facilities.
We've talked about this. Somebody else was housed in Vacaville. I feel like,
yeah.
But I can't. And I mean, like we've talked about somebody who was housed in Vacaville because I remember you saying that. Oh, it was right there, and I can't remember who it was, but
I don't remember who we talked about, but most certainly, like I think to this day, Ed Kemper is housed at CMF. Charles Manson was there for a long period of time. Many of the most notorious offenders that you can think of out of California would have passed through California Medical Facility because they're being evaluated and then classified as to where they could be housed within the California prison system.
So, not the traditional sense of a serial killer, but this guy destroyed everyone around him. And I hope we don't have a case like this next week. But this was a unique case for us.
Yeah, and it just, there are these types of people, greed is controlling them and they're willing to kill anybody, including their close loved ones, in order to get that financial gain.
I will see you in 2 weeks because we are off for winter break.
I have to wait 2 weeks to see you again, Kate?
Yes, sir. You do.
All right. Well, I'll suck it up and I'll see you then. How's that?
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.